everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video posted by Right Side Broadcasting. I will have their link in the description of the video about the government shutdown. And I like to focus on the insurance marketplace aspect. As an insurance agent myself, I have a lot of background and knowledge, and I would like to clear up some misinformation and just general lack of knowledge of how the marketplace and Medicaid work. So if you're all about those raw, honest reactions, you found the right place. I'm Indigo Moon, and here we dive into everything from the latest reaction videos and social commentary to breaking news events and so much more. You never know what's coming next. Just know it's going to be real, fun, and full of surprises. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel if you enjoy this type of content. Alright, let's get started. Alright guys, so this video is by Right Side Broadcasting. I will have their information in the description of this video. I'm going to use this video as reference about the government shutdown, specifically about the marketplace subsidies. I work in insurance. I've been doing insurance for a long time, almost a decade now, and I have sold marketplace plans, and I have also helped people get government assistance. So I know very well the ins and outs of the system and how people are misinterpreting how the law works, and just the general lack of knowledge even by our own government officials of how government insurance works.
Welcome everyone to day 8 of the Democrat shutdown. As is our custom now, we'll come out every morning and give you an update on where things stand. I've tried to make this as simple as possible and as digestible as possible. It seems complicated, what's happening in Washington right now. It actually is very simple. Don't let the Democrats distract you and try to convince you of things that are not true. Yesterday, or a couple of days ago, Monday, I laid out 6 simple truths about how the Democrats shut down the government, why they did it, and why it is so important for them to come to their senses and turn the lights on. Yesterday, I went through 5 fast facts for you about the shutdown, and I explained, as everyone now knows, Chuck Schumer's desperate attempts to rehabilitate his own image by shutting down the government. Today, we're going to talk about some of the consequences of that shutdown and what it means to real people around this country, real Americans experiencing the devastating cost of their political antics here. And I'm going to read you some sample quotes and headlines that we just collected yesterday from around the country. Here's a headline from The Hill. GOP leaders point to Capitol Police missed paychecks as shutdown drags on. So today, the U.S. Capitol Police officers are going to come to work to bravely protect U.S. government officials and staff in these dangerous times. They're going to do that without pay. Many Democrats in this chamber, by the way, I want to note, are going to receive paychecks this month, while the men and women of the U.S. Capitol Police who are protecting them will not. Here's another headline from the New York Post. Aviation groups warn a government shutdown will delay aircraft safety inspections, maintenance work on critical equipment. While air traffic controllers are going to continue to serve in their posts, thankfully, critical safety inspections are going to stop, increasing risk for air travelers. That affects everybody. Here's another headline from Georgia, local media in Georgia. Central Georgia food banks prepare for surge of new clients during the government shutdown. It's a sad headline. Remember, Georgia's 2 Democrat senators, Warnock and Ossoff, have now voted 5 times to keep the government closed down. 5 times so far. I suspect they may continue, and they're hurting real people in the state of Georgia. Here's one from New Hampshire local media. National parks caught in the crosshairs of government shutdown. Let me point out that both senators from New Hampshire, Senators Shaheen and Hassan, have repeatedly voted to keep the government closed, and New Hampshire's national park sites closed by extension. How about New Jersey? Here's a headline yesterday. Hospital at-home telehealth programs on hold amid government shutdown. You got 2 Democrat senators in New Jersey, Andy Kim and Cory Booker, and they have repeatedly voted against funding these programs, which New Jerseyans rely upon daily. Here's one from Michigan. Michigan nonprofit leaders said a shutdown would be at best disruptive and at worst potentially devastating for local communities. There are 2 Democrat senators in Michigan. Gary Peters and Alyssa Slotkin, and they have voted now 5 times to enable this devastation upon their communities. One more, I could do this all day. Here's one more from CBS News. Government shutdown fears have Colorado food banks bracing for potential new visitors. You guessed it. 2 Democrat senators from Colorado, Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper, they keep voting over and over to keep the government closed. Democrats claim they want to negotiate, but that is already happening in a bipartisan, bicameral fashion. And we brought in the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee this morning, Tom Cole, who can talk more about that. But I just want to say this as I yield to Mr. Cole, and then you'll hear from the rest of the leaders, and I'll take some questions. There is one sad and inescapable fact that no one can forget here. This shutdown is nothing more than political cover for Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. They are worried about the Marxist flanked in their Democrat Party. The Marxists are about to elect a mayor in New York City. That's Chuck Schumer's state, and he's terrified that he's going to get a challenge from his far left. I've noted that Chuck Schumer is a very far left politician, but he's not far enough left for the communists, and they're coming for him. And so he has to put up his dukes and show a fight. So they picked a fight on something that's not even related at all to the shutdown and the funding that we should have gotten done by the end of September. We just need a stopgap measure to give us a little more time to get the job of Congress done. They refuse to do it because they're playing politics, and real Americans are paying the price for it. But let me introduce Chairman Cole, and he can tell you about some of these discussions that have been going on.
All right, I noticed that I was just going to talk about insurance, but I just want to make a quick point here. I absolutely agree with everybody who says that if these Congress people can't come together to fund our government, then they shouldn't get paid. If everybody else doesn't get paid, they shouldn't get paid either, because they get paid a ridiculous amount of money on top of all the stock options that they get, which I feel like is totally illegal because of insider trading. But for whatever reason, we allow them to do that, and we allow them to increase their pay, and we need to put a stop to that, because I have family that's in the military right now serving without pay, and they are still going to be required to pay their mortgage, to pay their car notes, but the government doesn't have to pay them because these two sides are being so immature and being babies about this. And yes, it's both sides to an extent. The Democrats took this marketplace insurance thing and held it hostage. We'll get into it more later, but there is some validity of why this needs to be spoken about now. It's just shutting down the government was certainly not the way to do this. But this is what happens when there's so much contention on both sides, that they would be willing to make government workers, lowly government workers, continue work without pay, but they still get a very nice paycheck, their very nice vacations, and it's absolutely absurd, and something needs to be done about that.
Let's go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Usually when I follow the Speaker, I usually think I should just say what he said and excuse myself right away. But in this case, it is pretty easy. I mean, we've had a pretty decent year in the House Appropriations Committee, all 12 bills out of committee before September 30th. 3 that we are in negotiations on with the Democrats. Those negotiations have gone very well. We're prepared pretty quickly to close once the government's reopened. We could get at least 3 bills done. The President could sign them in. Those things would be immune from the shutdown until the following September 30th. Then we'd pick another group of 3 or 4 bills, and then we would do in cooperation with our Democratic colleagues and start working on that. So the process, honestly, was moving along pretty well, and then we had unrelated demands, obviously related to repealing work the Congress had already done on Medicaid, and then these new discussions on subsidies. And I do want to point out, at least the bill we have right now in front of us doesn't even go till December 31st. I mean, these actions would still, we could do this work and still have time to turn around, as the President and our leadership has pointed out in both chambers, and sit down and talk about these other issues. But it's hard to do much when the negotiations aren't happening simply because the government is shut down. So again, we're prepared to work. I've got very talented counterparts on the Democratic side. They're good negotiators. We've negotiated a lot of labor issue bills together between Patty Murray, Rosa DeLauro, and myself, and obviously Susan Collins is one of the best legislators in the building. So it's not like we were going to have a hard time, I think, finding common ground, but you do have to restore the government for that to happen. Democrats are not likely to move bills while they've got the government shut down, because it suggests that absent that, we would be moving through the process as normal, and frankly, in a much better shape than we've been in recent years. So again, I'm just hopeful that my colleagues in the Senate, and it's worth pointing out, a majority of the Senate's already on our side, a bipartisan majority of 55. So this really does get down to Leader Schumer and the bulk of his caucus to simply shutting down the government over items unrelated to what we normally do in appropriation. I've mentioned this to both the Speaker and the Leader because they make these decisions, but you know, we should not be handling Medicaid on my committee. We should not be handling the Obamacare subsidies simply because we don't have the expertise or the jurisdiction to do either one of those things. What we can do is move the bills through the process and make sure that every soldier is paid, make sure that every air traffic controller is paid, make sure that the American people don't lose any services. So we're prepared to do that. Frankly, I think my Democratic colleagues are prepared to do that once we resolve this shutdown, and that's quite simply in the hands of Leader Schumer and the bulk of his caucus. When they make the mind that they want the government up and running, believe me, we'll move very quickly, and we'll try to move away quickly from a CR status to passing bills individually or in small groups, and get folks up and working again, and get the government restored and continue that process as we're supposed to do. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I just yield back.
Well, appreciate the work that Chairman Cole and the Appropriations Committee have done months and months ago to get us in a place where we would be ready to have all of the appropriations in a place where you can negotiate those differences. It was Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries who chose to take their toys and go home, all to appease the most radical elements of the far left, because Chuck Schumer is more concerned about his political job than he is about the jobs of millions of American families. American families' lives are at stake here. Whether or not we're going to be able to pay our troops, whether or not people can get on an airplane and go visit a relative or take a vacation, whatever their plans may have been, are being disrupted. Real lives of real people are being disrupted so that Chuck Schumer can show the far left Marxists in his party that he's having some kind of tantrum and fighting Donald Trump because he's afraid of the far left part of his political base. A lot of people say, what is this really about? And obviously you see Democrats trying to make it about things that have nothing to do with the basic funding of government, the bill that we passed here in this House just a few weeks ago. And in fact, a lot of Democrats are having buyer's remorse, but every one of us has a voting card. And weeks ago, Republicans and Democrats in the House had an opportunity to put this voting card in the machine and tell the American people where they stand on a government shutdown. And 99% of House Republicans voted yes to keep the government open while we negotiate our differences, and 99% of Democrats voted no to shut the government down. Some of them are having buyer's remorse, and I don't blame them. They're now realizing the dire consequences that their no vote caused to real families across America. Some of them are begging the Speaker, please bring us back in so they can get another shot at this. You don't get a do-over. They picked the wrong side. They voted to shut the government down. They failed the test. But the good news is they can get bailed out by the Senate. If they really want to solve these problems, if they really want to make sure our troops get paid, which, by the way, we voted for, they voted against, they can call their 2 Democrat senators who have 5 times voted to shut the government down and say, today's the day you can make amends. Today's the day you can open the government up. We only need 4 more votes. It's not a large number. 4 Democrat senators have come to their senses and said, yes, let's open up the government and not have this charade continue, but it takes 4 more because Chuck Schumer wants to have a tantrum? Let me tell you what another senator just said yesterday about why this shutdown is going on. He said, quote, it's a Democrat senator yesterday, the point of this shutdown is not just suffering for suffering's sake, but to make a point. So you even have Democrat senators admitting that they're imposing suffering on the American people, but they just want to make a point? My God, millions of lives are at stake. They know they're inflicting suffering on the American people so they can make some kind of point? If you want to have a tantrum, this is not the third grade. This is the lives of American people. Real lives are at stake. Real careers and families. Will they be able to pay their house note come the 15th? That's at stake. The safety of our air traffic control system. So that some senator that wants to have a tantrum can make a point? I think the American people are getting sick of this charade that's going on. They know what the Democrats in the House did to shut the government down. But they also know that just 4 senators doing the right thing can turn this around and open the government back up again. And yes, we have big differences on a lot of things that we need to be negotiating on. All those bills that Chairman Cole and his appropriators sent out of committee, you can't have those negotiations while you're in a shutdown. And they know that. But they don't mind inflicting suffering on the American people because they want to make a point. I think the American people are going to start making points. People could pick up the phone and call their Democrat senator. We did a press call yesterday in the states of Georgia and Maryland, where all 4 senators there could literally end this today, but they've all been 5 times voting no on the bill to get the government back open. It was ironic. The Maryland delegation of Democrats held a press conference just days ago talking about how bad a shutdown will be for the state of Maryland. And they're right. The irony is they're the ones who voted to shut it down. Over 150 employees in the state of Maryland alone will be hurt, and their own Democrat delegation is saying how bad it's going to be, yet they're the ones who voted to inflict that, quote, suffering on the people of Maryland. This madness can end. This madness needs to end with sanity finally emerging. Bring some common sense in. And Chuck Schumer, if you can't do the right thing because you're so afraid of your political job, think about the jobs of millions of families out there who don't want to have that suffering inflicted on them. And let 4 other of your Senate Democrat colleagues do the right thing for you. Let's end this. Our whip, Tom Emmer.
Eight days. We are now 8 days into the Democrats' shutdown. 8 days that our troops are not getting paid. Border Patrol agents are going without mission-critical funding. Federal workers are being forced to figure out how they're going to put food on the table for their families. All because Democrats would rather hold the American people hostage to appease their radical base than to pass our clean, nonpartisan government funding bill. As of this morning, Senate Democrats have had 5 opportunities to get the government up and running again for the people they were elected to serve. And the vast majority of them have voted no every single time. Their obstruction is not only a slap in the face to hardworking Americans whose livelihoods are being put at risk due to the Democrats' shutdown, it's also a slap in the face to the constituents who fund their salaries with the expectation that they fulfill their basic constitutional responsibilities. In my hand, I have more than a dozen pages of organizations from across the country representing Americans from every end of the political spectrum, echoing the exact same message. And that message is that government shutdowns solves nothing and hurts everyone. So to our Democrat colleagues in the Senate, enough with the political grandstanding. Do the right and responsible thing by passing the House's clean CR immediately. Americans are already hurting. People's jobs are at stake. You can and must end the political games and reopen the government today. And with that, I turn it over to our conference chair, Lisa McClain.
morning, everybody. Again and again, Democrats have chosen to put illegal aliens over hardworking Americans. That is not my opinion. That is fact. Read the bill. Democrats let millions of illegals pour in across our border under Joe Biden. Democrats gave them driver's license. Democrats allowed them to cast ballots in elections. And now Democrats are fighting. They are fighting to give illegals health care on your dime. Democrats want to take money out of your pockets and give them to illegal aliens so they can get government benefits. These aren't my opinions. These are actual facts. Go to the website and read the facts, right? But what Democrats do when they have no plan, no vision, and no leader, they have to misrepresent the truth. And they do that over and over again. And they think you, the American people, aren't going to notice. They're not going to notice. You're not going to notice that they're taking money out of your pockets and giving them to illegals. They're going to try and put their spin on it. But I challenge you, go to the website and read it for yourself. When Democrats have the choice between standing up for American people or catering to the illegal aliens, what do? They choose illegals every single time and time again. And that's exactly what they're doing again in this government shutdown fight. Democrats are putting illegals above American citizens. So I ask the Democrats, how long will it take you to put Americans first in this funding fight? I ask our senators, Senator Peters and Slotkin, when are you going to put the American people first? The people that elected you to represent them. How many times will you vote against our troops? I ask Senator Peters and Senator Slotkin, how many times are you going to vote not to pay our troops? How many times will you vote against moms and babies who rely on WIC? Against flood insurance? How many times will you vote to put illegals first and Americans last? The answer to that question is as long as the radical base keeps calling the shots. My two senators are pandering to their radical base as well. Republicans, however, are actually putting Americans first every single day. And why? Because that's our job. That's our duty. And quite frankly, that is our responsibility. And I call on the Democrats, especially the two Democrats from my state, Senator Peters and Senator Slotkins, please put the American people who you represent first.
All right, so I just wanted to play part of that press conference by Mike Johnson and some of the GOP leaders. And now I'm going to go into the health insurance aspect of this argument. All right, guys, so before I go into the insurance stuff, I think it's important to talk about as well what government agencies are affected by this shutdown. So this article by Hollywood Life, it'll be in the description, goes over the list of services and agencies that are closed because of this government shutdown. Because I think there's a lot of confusion out there of what exactly is being shut down. So this was a really good list that goes over that. All right, here it says what businesses are closed during a government shutdown. The October 2025 government shutdown will affect non-essential businesses, but essential ones such as USPS, TSA, and the Social Security Administration and the military will continue working. They forget to put in here without pay. The following list includes businesses and agencies the shutdown could impact. So Department of Commerce, Department of Education, Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Labor, National Park Services, the Small Business Administration, NASA, the Food and Drug Administration, the CDC, General Services Administration, and the Department of Agriculture. Department of Agriculture is super important. Its name doesn't exemplify how important the USDA is, because that is who is funding our public schools meals. That's how our kids get breakfast and lunch at schools, how they're able to continue to get lunches during breaks and summer break. And that's also what funds the WIC program. Now, I had mentioned as an insurance agent, I have also helped people receive government benefits, and included in that is WIC. And WIC is a program that helps women while they're pregnant, and I believe till the child is 4 or 5 years old, with certain grocery items. They give them a list of the approved items, which is typically a pound of rice or a loaf of bread, a pound of cheese, a gallon of milk. I believe certain orange juices and certain apple juice, they're really picky about what goes through. About $10 in fruits and vegetables, and a certain size of cereal box too. It goes by the ounce, so it can be very difficult buying cereal because there's a lot of stipulations of what products will go through and what won't. And it's very specific by the brand and the individual item. For example, with cheese, you can't just buy any old pound of cheese. It typically has to be American or regular cheddar, for example. You can't buy any other of the cheeses, and it has to typically be the store brand ones. And it has to be a block. It can't be sliced cheese. So things like that. Now, something people don't really know about the WIC program is that it's not just for low-income families. It is also available to working class families. I believe it's, if you're a head of household, you can make up to 30 a year, and for married couples, it's 60 or 70. So much higher income requirements than food stamps that goes solely based on the poverty line. And whether you are on the poverty line or you are making 30K as a single mom, the amount of benefits that you get isn't based on a sliding scale. So everybody gets the same amount of benefits. And it's unfortunate that WIC isn't spoken about enough, because there's a lot of families who absolutely would not qualify for food stamps, but they would get WIC. And in times like these, with grocery prices the way they are, WIC is a super helpful program. Though it's a pain in the ass to navigate, it is very helpful. And then we also talk about here the SBA. There's a lot of people who are trying to acquire a small business license and loans that now are not going to be able to. NASA is interesting because if you were following the Atlas quote unquote comet, then you will know that Atlas is actually flying by between Mars and us towards the sun within these last few days. Lo and behold, we have this government shutdown, and we were supposed to be able to get images from a couple of the different satellites and other technologies that they have out there, like the Mars rover. But of course, now NASA is shut down, so we don't get to see those images. People have to look at the blurry one that the Brits put up. So it affects many different areas. Department of Education, they're the ones that handle student loans. So how are they going to process new student loans for kids that are going to be going to college in the spring or next year for the fall? All right, so I want to take everybody here to the healthcare.gov site. This is the website that insurance agents would be referring to when we're selling our clients' marketplace insurance. All right, so we're going to go over the eligibility requirements. So you have to live in the U.S., be a U.S. citizen, or be lawfully present non-U.S. citizen. And that's where the Dems are going to get you, and not be incarcerated. So what does the marketplace consider a lawful non-citizen? So here it states that as of August 25th, 2025, DACA recipients are no longer eligible for marketplace coverage. So Marketplace will end coverage for any DACA recipient enrolled in coverage and send them a letter telling them that they are no longer eligible for coverage. So it goes over here some more about the different types of immigration status. So non-citizens with certain approved employment-based immigration visas, people under the Family Unity Beneficiary, people adjusted to lawful permanent resident status, without an approved immigration visa petition, the SIJ classification, so that's for children under the age of 18, and children under 14 with a pending application for less than 180 days for withholding of deportation or withholding of removal. Based off of just those and how the Democrats had manipulated the immigration system to their benefit to get people who entered into this country illegally to give them an expedited status of citizenship, is how a lot of these people are able to still continue getting their coverage. Down here, immigration statuses that qualify: lawful permanent residents, so green card holders, asylees, refugees paroled in the U.S., granted employment authorization documents, and individuals with non-immigrant status, including work visas, and deferred action status. So just reading through that language, think about how many people over the last 4 years abused the system, got through the border through the help of Democrats, and how they were able to manipulate statuses. So this is the reason why Republicans are so upset, because though their wording back in August spoke about DACA recipients, it didn't really, and I think that's something our government is still trying to figure out, is what to do with the people who came in through that app that were just automatically given just green card status, basically asylum or refugee status, and have just been able to manipulate the system in their favor, and that is how they're able to manipulate the insurance system. And that's what the Republicans are so upset about, because it is trillions and trillions, I'll show you in a different article, of how much money is being subsidized into the healthcare coverage of many elite. But this does pose a problem for the rest of us, because open enrollment starts November 1st. Those coverage dates begin January 1st. And if the government can't get together and figure out what they're going to be doing this Obamacare, there's going to be a lot of people in the air without insurance who are U.S. citizens. Now, I want to go over here to congress.gov, that'll be in the description as well, about Medicaid and CHIP coverage. So we also have a lot of people in the illegal community that would not qualify for Marketplace, because Marketplace is based on your income, and so they would receive Medicaid benefits. And what does that require? Status resident, documentation of U.S. citizenship, and immigration status. And they follow exactly the same rules. So what does it say? Medicaid and CHIP non-citizen eligibility rules. Non-citizens eligible for Medicaid and CHIP largely depend on their immigration status, whether they arrived in the U.S. before August 22, 1996, and how long they have lived and worked in the U.S. In addition, alien applicants must meet the program's other eligibility requirements, right? Qualified and non-qualified aliens. In general, with respect to applicants' immigration status, non-citizen eligibility for most federal public benefits, including Medicaid and CHIP, is governed by the term qualified alien. Qualified aliens include lawful permanent residents, refugees, aliens granted parole for at least a year, aliens granted asylum, certain abused spouses and children, Cuban Haitian entrants, and citizens of freely associated states who reside in the U.S. and our territories. It says here as well, non-immigrants, those with TPS, short-term parolees, asylum applicants, and those granted DACA, unauthorized immigrants, and other classes of non-citizen granted temporary permission to remain in the U.S. are non-qualified aliens. So it goes back to the bill that was passed back in August. And the last webpage I want to take a look at is Insurance Informant. The link will be in the description. And this article kind of goes over exactly what are health insurance subsidies, because I think there's a lot of confusion coming from both sides of the aisle of how insurance subsidies actually work. And I'll speak a little bit more on it as we go through the article. So the first question is, what is a health insurance subsidy? A health insurance subsidy introduced by the ACA aims to make health insurance coverage more affordable for individuals and families. These government-provided subsidies help lower costs through premium tax credits, cost-sharing reductions, and state initiatives. Premium tax credits specifically reduce monthly health insurance premiums. They are available through the state health insurance exchanges. If insurance is obtained outside these exchanges, premium tax credits are not applicable. So essentially, when Obama started the Affordable Care Act, it was an exchange program with different contracts that they had made with certain insurance companies like Humana, Blue Cross Blue Shield, some smaller ones like Oscar, and the government told them if they would conduct some of their business on the marketplace, the government would flip some of the bill for the applicants. So the ACA is a income-based system. So what makes it a little bit tricky is you have to calculate what your income is going to be for the following year, which would then be the next tax year. So for example, people on November 1st this year who are going to be applying need to guess their income for 2026. Most people are easily able to do that because they've been working the same job, they know how much they get paid. Something changes, like they get a raise or something, that's different, but they know week to week, month to month how much they're going to get paid. Now if a person is doing gig type work like DoorDash or Instacart, that's where it can get really tricky because you're estimating. You don't know 100% how you're going to do. That's all going to be based on your area, how much effort you put, how much orders are being put in, etc., etc., etc. So the amount of tax credit you can receive is all based on your income. The more income you make, the less tax credit you have. And something that I have always found that was completely wrong with this system is that the insurance companies are still pricing on the exchange their normal prices. And then depending on how much of a tax credit you get is how much of that can be applied to the insurance. And so you have two ways you can do this. You can either apply the tax credit right away. So based on your estimated income, the government tells you how much they are willing and able to cover. And through the month of that year, they will pay that. Now, when it comes time to do your taxes the following year, you are going to be required to fill out a form that shows how much the premium was, how much the government paid, and how much you paid, and then whether or not, based on that estimation, you owe the government or they owe you. I've seen it happen both ways because it can be very tricky estimating your income because you don't know what could happen. You could lose your job in the middle of the year and then a few months later get another job that's higher income, but you have to average out the couple of months maybe you are without work. So it can get very, very tricky. The second option is you pay the full price up front, and then when it comes to tax time, that same form needs to be filled out, and now you will receive the money back from the government's portion as a tax credit. Most people, of course, take the option where the government pays them ahead of time because the prices that these insurance companies are charging is so ridiculous. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. How much does Obamacare cost the federal government? 5 years ago, annual spending on Obamacare subsidies stood at $57 billion. But by 2024, it's projected to surge to $125 billion. In 2023, federal health insurance subsidies are estimated at $1.8 trillion, comprising 7% of the GDP. So this is how much our government is spending on these subsidies. Now, the premium tax credits subsidize healthcare costs for individuals with incomes between 100 to 400% of the FPL. The rising cost of health insurance for American middle class persists. In 2024, federal spending on healthcare programs will reach $1.9 trillion. The Democrats' plan to extend Obamacare subsidies could cost taxpayers an additional $383 billion over the next decade, highlighting ongoing expenses related to the program. And this is exactly the problem. These subsidies are costing us and the government way too much. And a lot of that stems from how much these insurance companies are charging, which they're only allowed to legally make a 20% profit. So I really like to know where they're hiding all this money. Do health insurance companies receive federal funding? The federal government subsidized health insurance for over 150 million Americans through various programs and tax benefits, which cost reaching 1.8 trillion in 2023, 7% of the GDP. So we kind of went over that. And the federal spending is projected to cover 49% of healthcare expenditures by 2031, while private insurance will account for 30%. For consumers purchasing coverage through marketplace, tax credits based on household income subsidizes insurance costs. So approximately 178 million employees obtain subsidized insurance through their employers, and 52 million people buy insurance directly through the subsidized exchange. Based on those numbers, even that alone, 52 million people are on the program. How many of those are illegals and receiving subsidies? I don't know. But one thing I can tell you is that the government most definitely calculated income differently for those who are non-citizens and those who were. For example, I had written a plan for a man and his family and his 2 children, and he was making $72K as an illegal immigrant. And no, it's obviously not from farming. That's like one of the stupidest things that Democrats talk about. Most of these people are doing gig work, DoorDash, Instacart, things like that. They have a family member who has papers, sign up and get the account, and then they give them the login information and they do it under that person's name. And then while they're in the app, they can change the accounting information to theirs, their banking account information. And so they can just directly get that money and only needed their cousin for name, basically. So let me go back to my story. So this man was able to get a full ride subsidy. So that means that the government paid the entire bill for him. So he didn't have to pay for any of the insurance. He had chosen Blue Cross Blue Shield, and their plan was roughly about $2,000 a month for them, with a deductible of $5,000 per person. So they got that full ride. Some weeks later, I had a woman made a policy for her and her husband, their 4 children. Their combined income was $60K, so less than the illegal immigrant. So you think she'd get a full ride too, right? Nope. Based on her income, they only received a $20 subsidy for the same $2,000 plan. So the Republicans have every right to be upset because they do the same thing with food stamp benefits. Illegals get hundreds and hundreds of, close to $1,000 a month in food stamps. The same size American family might get $200 at best a month. So that's where a lot of these problems, I believe, are coming in from. People not really truly understanding how this system works. As an insurance agent, I would say the marketplace is trash. I think that these insurance companies are way overcharging for their policies. They are way overcharging for deductibles. I don't think it's right that a family should have to pay $2,000 a month for insurance. Each individual person in their family has a $5,000 deductible, which means for each person, they have to spend $5,000 out of pocket before the insurance would kick in. But because those deductibles are so high, what a lot of people do is abuse the ER system. They will go to the ER, pretend that they have like a headache or something, a stomach ache, something not very obvious, and then it racks up the bill. So they reach their deductible, pay that, and then get their insurance. It's a bit of a gray area thing, because you're going in faking an ailment just so you can reach your deductible. But the fact that people have to do that every year is crazy. So our emergency rooms are filled up with people who are not really sick but are just trying to pay off their deductible so they can get the full benefits of their insurance. I think that is a problem as well that we need to look into. But health insurance companies are huge donors on both sides of the political aisle. So they'll never investigate how much they're making and how much they're charging us, because that's what the problem is. They talk about it in all these articles. Insurance costs is rising, medical costs are rising, and our pay isn't, but we're still expected to pay these insurance companies hundreds and hundreds, close to thousands of dollars a month for very little to nothing health insurance coverage. Because in the end, if you are in dire need, your best bet still with insurance is probably to go to the emergency room. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today's reaction. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I did. If you did, make sure to hit the thumbs up and drop a comment below with your thoughts. What do you think of the video? Do you agree with my reaction, or did I miss something? I'd love to know. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a reaction. Thanks, guys.